Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of 8 January 2018. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item?
Yes, just for the record, due to the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, the City Council will not meet on Monday, January 15th. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 10. Is Kyle Johnson here?
Yes.
If you would please come forward.
Sir.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Johnson. I'm here to be confirmed my appointment to the Capital and Barrens Commission. I'm a lawyer in town. I have an office at 1227 Lincoln Mall in the district itself. I've enjoyed the building forever. My mother was the state law librarian for the Supreme Court for many years, and I knew some nooks and crannies of the building. I grew to appreciate it a great deal, and I think what is being done to preserve the prominence of the building is great. Great for the building, great for Lincoln, great for the area. I would appreciate your confirmation.
Great. Are there questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you very much, sir, for your willingness to serve. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Items 1 and 2 were introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that we have the appropriations from our Human Services Department. It's a joint city-county department that are being voted on today. These are Keno lottery funds, a small portion of which, about 5% of which, are dedicated to funding emergency needs in our community. And we have a citizen and city-county committee that takes time to review these applications. There are about 25 programs receiving these funds, and they're doing important work in the community to address really high urgency needs. This is one of the ways that we contribute to supporting our nonprofits and taking care of our residents who are most in need in Lincoln.
All right. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 3 was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions.
Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that today is the last day as our Sergeant-at-Arms of Officer Conan Schaefer. Thank you for your service. We will miss you. And we'd like to welcome Officer Brian Hofer. Looking forward to serving with you, sir. Well, please call the first item there.
All right, our first items will be items 11 and 12, application of Method Cycles and Craft House for a Class C liquor license at 416 South 11th Street, and the related manager application of Deborah Stephen.
Please come forward.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
I'm Deborah Stephen, 4353 Washington, and I am the new owner of Method Cycles and Craft House.
Okay. Tell us about your application, please.
Well, it's been a very well-run business for the last year. I think they've had maybe a liquor license for 6 months or a year, and I'm just hoping to continue what they've been doing, adding some food, continuing the bike shop business, and I love the concept of the bikes, the coffee, and the cocktails. So that's my hope.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Am I supposed to sign these here?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next are items 13 and 14, application of Lucky's Lounge and Grill for a Class C liquor license at 1101 West Bond Street, and the related manager application of Mark Gooden.
You can come to this
You can come on
microphone
up to
over
this one, Mark. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
My name is Mark Gooden. I live at 3010 Porter Circle in Lincoln.
here. Okay, tell us about your application, please.
I am in the process of purchasing Lucky's Lounge and Grill from Jesse Osborne. That location has been operating there for over 10 years. Jesse's owned it for about 7 or 8, I think now. And he was interested in getting out, so I found out about it and decided it was a good opportunity for me. I submitted my application also as manager. However, I do have another full-time job, and so I've found a current employee that I believe was going to be a good manager applicant for me. And her application's been submitted, and I believe you'll probably take it up again sometime later. It's a good operation. It's been there for a long time, and it's been known as Lincoln's best barbecue.
Okay, questions? John?
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Could you explain a little bit about the relationship? I know on some of the materials initially submitted there was Spencer, who I believe is your son. Could you help us understand the relationship there between the two of you and this establishment and the lease and or purchase of the business?
Right. Spencer's my son. I've known him his entire life.
Good thing.
And he's been in the food service business here in Lincoln for about half his life, about 15 years. And he owns the Little King sub shops here in Lincoln. There are 2 of them, and has turned those around and made them profitable. Because of his contacts in the industry, he found out about Jesse selling Lucky's and investigated it, brought it to me for analysis for the financials and the legal stuff. And it was obviously a very promising investment. Spencer wouldn't qualify for a liquor license, and so I talked to Jesse and said, I'll take this over and step into the purchase agreement and the lease and all that kind of stuff. And so Jesse was amenable to that. And we applied. We do not have a temporary permit, so we're trying to get things cleaned up and all, trying to hit the ground running at the right time. So any further question on that? Hopefully I answered it.
I appreciate that. Well, in fact, Investigator Schaefer, would you come forward too from the police department and perhaps give us some more information on this situation, please?
Yes, Conan Schaefer, Police Department.
On this application, could you give us some more background, please?
Yes, I was initially approached by Mr. Gooden's son, Spencer, on at least 2 occasions. I think maybe third time was through a phone call, but where Spencer was inquiring about the purchase and obtaining a liquor license at Lucky's. Spencer had provided me with some documentation that he had obtained on his criminal history, and I observed that he had 2 disqualifying convictions. I advised Spencer of that. He had subsequent conversations with individuals at the Liquor Commission and was advised that he would not be eligible for the liquor license. And I think it sort of started snowballing because I think Spencer, being motivated enough to want to make this deal happen, continued those conversations. And then at some point, Mark, his father, took over, so it raised some questions about Spencer's involvement, or was he really the person that was applying and just putting his father up to make the application? And those are conversations that I had with Mark as well. When we did get the application, Spencer's name was initially listed on the lease as being a guarantor, and which also raised some questions. During my interview with Mark, he indicated that Spencer would have some involvement with marketing and kitchen management, which, in my estimation, had something to do with the operation of the business, and where a disqualified person would not be allowed to be involved with the business. It just raised some concerns. Today, about mid-morning, I did receive additional information from the Liquor Commission, which I just didn't have time to present to the City Council, which was lease amendments and information removing all mention of Spencer from being on the lease. But I don't think that really changed what had happened, what brought us to this point. So Mr. Gooden has assured me that he is the sole 100% shareholder and owner and operator, but we just felt like it needed to be looked in a little bit more deeply to make that. I wasn't the one to make that final determination, so I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. There was also one other kind of a side issue or concern. There was some, due to the location and zoning concerns, and I can't speak fully about it, but I think Brian Will is here from the planning department, about obtaining a special permit for somehow Lucky's had obtained a special permit for on-premises consumption only. However, they actually have an on and off sale. Mr. Gooden has applied for an on and off sale. And he may not, I'm not sure where he's at in that permit process, but I don't think at this time he has obtained any special permits that zoning has indicated might be required. But you could ask Mr. Will about that.
Okay, well, maybe we get that. Mr. Gooden, could you comment on what Investigator Schaefer has said?
Right. Everything that Conan said is absolutely true. Spencer found out about the deal first and investigated it, but before he actually made his application, realized that he would not qualify. In his effort to understand the process and learn how something could get done, he asked an awful lot of questions, raising the specter of a straw man type arrangement. I assure you, I'm not here to do that for Spencer. I've done an awful lot for Spencer, but he's not going to get me in trouble. I refuse to do that. This is an investment for me. It's a good investment. I'm getting closer to retirement. I believe there are staff people in place, including Amy as the liquor manager and the bar manager, that would help me with the liquor side of the operation. And I can't say Spencer won't ever be around, because he's my son and he knows this business and can make a tremendous contribution to the success of the business. I signed an agreement with Jesse that we would pursue this deal and gave him a down payment. If it doesn't happen, I understand. But my commitment is to do it right. And by asking questions, I understand Spencer could have raised, the wrong impression. As far as the Class C thing, I've learned that we really don't do any off-sale sales significance at all, and so we'll probably change our application or something so that we do not have off-sale at all.
Hey, Carl?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, I don't think we have anything more for Officer Schaefer, do we? Thank you.
So, I don't know, Lucky's is located in a hotel, right?
It is connected to the travel lodge, yes.
So, I don't know if that's the off-sale business where an individual could buy a beer or whatever and take it to their room. Is that how it's typically been done there, do you know?
No, apparently, the way that I understand the off-sale extent of it was on a Friday night, people would take a case of beer with them. That's, when they leave, but not necessarily to the hotel.
All right. So you'd indicated, is it Amy?
Yes.
Well, you intend that she would be the manager and she has an application?
Yes.
She submitted?
And Conan said that he did receive it, but he hasn't had a chance to process it to you yet.
Just kind of thinking out loud, I mean, would seem to make sense that we would postpone this until we get her application and then deal with this at that time? Is that?
I would assume that you're going to have another hearing for that, and if you want to postpone mine until then, that's fine with me.
Okay, thank you.
Carl? I mean, not Carl, John. Over there.
That's my other name. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate, Mr. Gooden, your comments and all. You mentioned during your initial testimony that because there is no temporary license, so is the establishment just not serving anything, or what's the status right now? Because you indicated there's sort of a time of the essence matter, I believe.
That's true. The previous owner's still the owner, and they are operating under his permit, and he's continuing to do the work and the job that he's done before. But he has other businesses and other things going on as well, and so that's why he's wanting to get out. And the urgency is for him, not necessarily for me, but I'd like to get going.
Could we have Mr. Will come up and talk about the zoning, just to make sure we understand that, and then I had some other.
Yeah, good afternoon, Brian Will with the Planning Department. Recall that for the sale of alcohol in the city of Lincoln, there are two separate special permits, one for on sale and one for off sale. We do have a record of special permit for on sale for Lucky's Lounge. It is this other component for on sale that we do not. And so
They're for on or off sale?
On sale is of record, off sale is not. Yeah, and so that was a comment that was made during the review of this liquor license, was that Class C liquor license going through the process now allows for both on and off sale, but there is no special permit for the off sale. So the applicant is going to need to follow through and get that.
But that was by special permit to do that?
Correct.
And would you anticipate that would be available, or is there some other element that we should be aware of?
No, we've evaluated the property. It looks like it meets the requirements okay. Just, it's a matter of the applicant going through the application process. Those are final action at Planning Commission. Okay, so it's going to be, now the next application deadline is January 17th, so that's about 4 to 6 weeks out before, well, about 6 weeks out before that would potentially be approved.
So the applicant could go for just on premises only, and then.
Well,
later
that's,
amend
yes,
it?
that's the dilemma right now, is the license in process right now is Class C, on and off sale. Don't have the zoning approval for all of that, however. So in talking to the applicant, was it you and me that
Yes.
spoke today? Yeah, so one of the suggestions was, well, just modifying the license. My question was, do you actually have the intention, desire for off-sale, or is, you know, is that part of this or not? And if it's not, just modify your license to allow for on-sale. So that was my advice. I'm not sure really what their intent is.
That is my intent.
Okay. Mr. Gooden, I have I visited with some of my colleagues before, and this is an unusual situation that in my 19 years never quite experienced. And we act as something of a review and then give our recommendation to the State Liquor Control Commission. You've talked about time of the essence and all. At that level, they do an investigation, and I know a couple of my colleagues have expressed this is just unusual, and I can appreciate where Spencer may have asked a lot of questions. It raised concerns. One thought I had, and I generally make motions on how we handle licenses, and because of the timing situation and all, and need to change it, if we were to deny the application here, then it would automatically go to the State Liquor Commission for review. They do the investigation, and I think that way, again, as I said, we do kind of a review, not to say that Investigator Schaefer hasn't done his due diligence, but we're just at a different level. But that might also help you on timing and all, and then that, since they have the ultimate say anyway, I guess I'm curious what your reaction is, and I don't know if my colleagues would all support me on that, but that's one thought I had, especially where you talked about these other contingencies and with the current owners and all.
Right. I understand that the State Commission is in the process of evaluating it and setting their first meeting. I haven't heard when their first meeting is. I would prefer not to have a denial from you on the record. Perhaps, you know, tabling it would serve. But I expect to deal with all of the issues and concerns that they may have. And I understand what they are, partly from my discussions with them when they declined the top. So I'm aware of the concerns and aware of the consequences and the possibilities.
Well, I appreciate the way you've been open and responding on this. I think that's probably the best way to do it for everyone's benefit, so that you and then your relationship with your son and so forth, that everything is fully understood. So,
Cindy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gooden. Thanks for being here tonight. I saw on the letter from the investigator that you were scheduled for a class this coming Thursday, the 11th. Are you?
I had it in my head it was tomorrow, but I'll
Oh, you
double
did?
check that. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Well, maybe if it is, don't miss it.
Yeah,
I know
right.
it's just a date. We just said the 11th. So you're planning to go whatever happens. If we delay up here, you would go in
Right.
either case. Okay.
Amy and I are both planning to attend that.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
You have one, Cindy? Irene?
I see that we have a couple of attorneys here, and I'm not sure which would like to speak to this, but I'm curious about what the implications of a delay are for this application, or if can they be consolidated when Ms. Amy can't remember her name, is brought forward. No, the manager that Mr. Gooden has selected. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Tanya Peters, City Attorney's Office. Unfortunately, delaying is not going to work. We have the 45-day review period, and just kind of looking at it, it looks like the 15th would be the 45-day, and obviously you don't have City Council meeting on the 15th. So today is either approve it or deny it. If you don't take action on it, it will be considered automatically approved. So.
Okay.
In the resolution, I'll point out, we did have some language on line 9 through 15 regarding Spencer's involvement, and line 16 and 17 to require the special permit. So if you choose to approve it, the draft resolution you have requires, prevents Spencer's involvement and requires him to get a special permit. The other thing, just kind of comment, you haven't asked this question, but to modify his application, he has to submit a new application. So he can't just say all of a sudden now I'm going from a C to an I. So he has to submit a new application. So if that's the plan, it's probably better that he just withdraw everything, go back to the drawing board, start all over again.
Okay, in that light, sir, would you care to withdraw your application at this point in time, or would you rather us vote on it?
Can I say one
Just
thing?
ask what your opinion is.
We would need him to contact the Liquor Commission saying that he's withdrawing it before you guys,
Okay.
before you do anything,
Got it.
because we
Okay.
need an official from them. So.
Okay,
But if, one more point, but you said because we don't have a meeting next week, the 45 days would elapse, so if we didn't do anything today, that would be automatic approval.
Right, he would basically needs to send an email now saying that he would like to withdraw his application so that we have some communication to the Liquor Commission. Because what's happened in the past is somebody has said, oh, I'm gonna withdraw it, they don't withdraw it, and then in hopes that you guys trust them and then it moves forward. I'm not saying that is with this applicant, it's just our process is you have to contact the Liquor Commission to withdraw it before council, basically takes it off their agenda, so.
Lyrian?
Ms. Peters, do you have a copy of the resolution that you were mentioning? Because it's not linked online for, we've
It
got a
is-
new
I know, I noticed that too.
website.
I will pass my copy around, I highlighted it, but.
Thank you.
Now, I have another question for you, Tanya. So even if it doesn't say that in the resolution, those are still conditions that apply by state law, correct?
Which part?
The part where his son cannot participate in the business?
Well, the Liquor Commission and the city will put that on record, and so if you approve it with those conditions and the Liquor Commission approves it with those conditions, it will be on the license itself and on the website so that there's a tracking history of it and it's enforceable. Otherwise, if it's not brought to the Liquor Commission's attention, there would be nothing that would prohibit his son from being involved and no one knowing about it. So this just kind of lays the rules on if Mark gets approved, that your son should not be involved in the operation of it. And if we find out, we will come back on the liquor license. And we've done this in a couple of other locations before. Omaha has done it, Grand Island and Kearney and different places. If you get on, you can see some other places where people have been limited. A lot of times they're felons or they have some other lying before city council and before the Liquor Commission. That was one example. But we've had some other straw men type situations where we put those restrictions on.
Okay. John?
Again, following the chronology here, it sounds like if, as Mr. Will said, they'd have to go to Planning Commission to then to get the off sale, which is what's been applied for, but have to totally do a new submission. We need to do something now, and there sounds like there are three options here. One, we could approve it. Number two, we could disapprove it, deny it. I guess there are four options. We could just do nothing, and then we could also let Mr. Gooden verbally tell us he's going to withdraw. But still, there's a time element, and he really can't go to the Liquor Commission because he can't.
He's going to have a time delay no matter what. In all honesty, they're going to set him up for a show cause hearing. So he's looking at probably at least 30 days out before he gets a hearing from them. So if you
That's the-
approve
the-
it, what's... go
Just so
ahead.
you know, their first hearing this year is on the 17th.
Right, and we have one set, but I don't think that his
Get
will be
on
on
the
that
time.
agenda.
Right.
Yeah. So he's probably looking at, I don't know if they meet once, I think they meet once a month, 30 days approximately. So he would have enough time to probably go to Planning Commission and get that taken care of before he goes to the Liquor Commission, or he could delay his hearing before the Liquor Commission if he was short on time. He could get that special permit issue taken care of. He could have also applied and got on when he became aware of the special permit issue and probably had that taken care of. So.
Okay. Lyrian?
Could you just clarify what will happen if this was to be approved with those conditions that you highlighted? It will trigger still there is a state hearing that you expect?
I expect because of the first condition, that the Liquor Commission is already looking at that as a condition to put on this license. I don't know that for sure, but that's my suspicion. So I would think he's going to be set up for a hearing anyway. But if we put that limitation on there, that'll be an automatic hearing. They'll have a hearing on that condition. They wouldn't have a hearing on the special permit condition. They would just wait for him to get that special permit done and then issue it. If you approve it with these conditions, what's going to be necessary is the city clerk is going to have to draw the council's or commission's attention to these two conditions, because they are a little bit unusual. And so we would want them to know that these two concerns are out there, although you're giving a conditional approval. If you deny it, it's easier because their attention is more drawn to it. But that's just one extra step for the city clerk is if you approve it.
Cindy?
So I'm just a little unclear whether those conditions are part of the resolution, or we would need to substitute those for what's in the resolution.
The draft that you have, that I have prepared for you, or that staff has prepared for you, have both of those conditions in there. If you want to change them, it's certainly within your prerogative to do so. You just need to do that and let us know what you want them to say. You should have probably got a copy of these before. I'm sorry I was gone, and it is a little bit different for staff to send those out, so sorry about that.
Thank you. I just didn't know if we needed to go a step further.
I try to get you a good draft of where I think you're gonna go, and sometimes you don't go that way, and sometimes you do. But you're welcome to amend that, and so if you'd like this copy back, you can certainly have it.
No.
But the easiest would be to do a denial, but then he does have a recommendation of denial on his record. In all honesty, based upon his testimony, I would say the best thing for him would be to do is withdraw it and start over with the application that he wants and with that manager, and just come back to the table. But I have to leave that to him.
This is the first that I've heard of specific conditions on the approval. I would like to see those in case I can respond to them definitively.
Ms. Peters, as I read those, it pretty much excludes Spencer from setting foot on the premises.
No, we've had one of those clauses, but no, he could still go there and
But you said stocking shelves, I think, or something. So I mean,
yeah,
it's just really,
that's
work
the
there.
standard language we've used with the liquor commission, or they've used, just to prevent them from being in control of that operation.
All right, Benny?
I want to follow up on that just a little bit. So if he were working the restaurant but not around the bar, that would be okay in this, or is that kind of one of those
I don't know how
answer
you
that question?
separate the two, yeah.
And the other part is, if we vote to deny today, would the applicant have a chance to withdraw before it went to the liquor commission?
Yes, yes.
And then it would be starting over again.
Okay. All right, other questions? You have a comment, sir?
Yes. You hit upon the key question, I think, that I have. I am trying to do everything that I can to firewall the different sides of this business so that Spencer is not involved in any way, shape, or form in the ownership or the liquor part of the operation. However, it's really important that he be involved from the marketing side and the food side and the kitchen side, because that's where his expertise is, and he's already got tons of ideas about how to make that change. He will not share in the profits. He will not share in anything except as being a plain employee like everybody else. He will not be involved in the liquor counting. That's why Amy is there, and that's what she does. The inventory, the stocking the shelves, anything related to liquor, he's completely off limits. But what I'm hearing from the commission and other people is the inability to distinguish between that firewall. And I want to try and do it right, but I'm not hearing specific enough guidance, I guess, on that. And
My suggestion is when we vote, we look at what Benny has hit upon, a denial, you withdraw your application. Because frankly, my opinion, I don't know if it's shared by my colleagues or not, is that this is convoluted enough with enough questions involved that are specific to liquor law that it belongs at the commission, not here.
I'll come with my lawyer next time
There
that
you
can
go.
help me out.
Okay. Is-
Can Ms. Peters respond to Mr. Gooden's comments about what he sees his son being involved in, the marketing food and kitchen operations? Are those allowable based on law that you've considered in this case?
The liquor laws don't distinguish between the different subdivisions of the liquor establishment. That whole establishment is licensed. Liquor is allowed to be served in there. And let's face it, it's a predominant part of the business. You know, the food goes with the liquor. People do order food without liquor, but the reality is most oftentimes those are ordered together. And so there's not a way to separate those. If they were in two separate rooms and operated as two separate businesses, you could make that argument, but that's not the layout here. And so the Liquor Commission would look at it as who is in control, who's making decisions in that business. And I would think that they're going to look at marketing and control of the food and those type of things as being in control of that business. They may not, but that's my guess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cindy?
Thank you. I just have one more question for you. So, but when businesses, restaurants that serve alcohol are granted liquor licenses, do we have requirements for when they hire employees that are going to be kitchen managers or something, that they can't hire employees that have certain crimes on their record or certain felony convictions?
No, the food permits don't do a background check like that. Where we catch them is when they first come in with the idea of buying the business and then find out they can't, and then find someone else to buy the business and then have that strong control over it. This is not our first parent-child situation where the parent has came in to kind of take over the situation when the child can't. The last one, we found the child living in the upstairs of the business and managing it, writing checks on it. So it's not our first rodeo. Doesn't mean that this one's not going to be different, but we've kind of seen this path before, and this is usually where the child takes over. The child that's ineligible to run the business takes over after the liquor license is granted. But we do this route, and if we find out that child is running the business, then we can go back and take action on the license.
Okay. John?
Really appreciate the way our dialogue and conversation has gone here. I think what I'm going to do when I make a motion is I'm going to move to deny. I think overall that's the best interest, and then you can regroup and come through with whatever needs to be done, planning and so forth. And really then, as my colleague Mr. Christensen said, the State Liquor Commission can review that and go through it in detail. They're more of an investigative unit. But I think the way you're approaching it is very business-like, and I appreciate that. My colleagues will support that, but that's what I'm going to do, and I just want you to know at this point.
Okay.
That's very straightforward. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 15, manager application of Christina McCracken for Blink Restaurants, doing business as Iron Horse Bar and Event Room at 728 Q Street, Suite B.
Ms. McCracken, you can sign that after you testify.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that helps.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Christina McCracken, 444 F Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68508.
Okay, please tell us about your application.
We currently have a location for the last, I guess, year and a half, and we do private parties out of that location. Before that, I think the cask was there. And occasionally we do open for game days to the public and then before events. But
Okay. Questions? Thank you very much.
thanks.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 16, manager application of Christopher Cowan for Carrie Johnson Oil Company, doing business as Easy Go number 80 at 2555 O Street and Easy Go number 81 at 8411 Windmill Drive. I will note for the record that we have received a request to withdraw this application.
I would make that motion to withdraw.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion, please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Sure, I would note, though, that if there is somebody here who
Yes.
wanted to testify, they're
They're
sure
welcome to do so. Okay.
And with that, Mr. Chair, since that's the end of our liquor section, I would move approval of items 11, 12, and 15.
Need a
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. Discussion, please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to move denial of items 13 and 14.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. Discussion?
Yeah,
Carl.
just also the thing that John didn't communicate to Mr. Gooden was the fact that he can contact the Liquor Commission and withdraw that, and so
Right.
that's something that you can
And
do.
that, I think that's our recommendation, that's what happens. So, further discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Motion carried 6-1. Next then are our public hearing resolutions. Item 17, approving a contract between the city and Continuum Employee Assistance Training Consulting for Employee Assistance Program Services for a 3-year period from January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2020.
Doug McDaniel, Human Resources, a 3-year contract with Continuum EAP. They serve as our employee assistance program for the city, also serve as our substance abuse professional for our DOT drug testing processes.
Okay, are there questions? Lyrian?
Thanks, Doug. Is this a new contract, or if not, is there any changes from the previous?
There are no changes. There is a slight increase in fees. It's the same contract we had with Continuum the last 3 years, which was for the period of 2015 through 2017.
Okay.
So everything remains the same.
Okay. And these services, do you have a sense of how often they're used?
Yes, I can give you information on utilization rate is 8%. 191 employees and families receive services. This is for the calendar year 2016. We don't have 2017 statistics yet. 29 management referrals, 158 EAP management referrals, and 1,662 different activities recorded. The national utilization average is 3 to 4.5%, where our Continuum EAP at the city is at 8%. We have quite a bit of data we can share, but overall the return on investment is well over $250,000, basically.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 18. I'll call items 18 and 21 together. They are special permit 1219N, application of Bryan Med Center for authority to amend special permit 1219M to allow Bryan Med Center East to construct wall signage larger than 50 square feet and amend their campus signage plan on property generally located at 48th and A Streets. And then they also submitted text amendment 17020, amending Title 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code by amending Section 27.69.260 to revise the sign provisions for non-residential healthcare facilities and post-secondary schools, and repealing Section 27.69.260 as hitherto existing.
Good afternoon, members of the City Council. Danae Kalkowski. I'm appearing today on behalf of Bryan Medical Center. Also with me today is Don Sheets, the Facilities Director at Bryan, and Bob Norris with Nebraska Sign and other representatives of Nebraska Sign. So in the end, if we have any questions, they'll be available to help answer any questions you might have. I asked Teresa to call both of these items together because the applications were initially submitted together, and it just made sense to me to talk about them together and maybe just save a little time as we go through them. So I may need just an extra minute or two as we go through both of them. But a couple months ago, Bob Norris and I met with Planning and Building and Safety to address or discuss some additional building signage for the Bryan East campus. And the reason that Brian was looking at adding some additional signage was to assist with some wayfinding on the buildings out there on their east campus. Bryan exists as a healthcare facility, and so they exist under a special permit under there. And so the signage code provision 2769-260 addresses signage for non-residential healthcare facilities and also post-secondary schools. So signage is really addressed in two ways out there. Number one, by that provision of the signage code, and then number two, by the special permit. Because the special permit, the signage plan required under the code would be provided as part of the special permit. And if the applicant wanted additional signage above what was required by or allowed by the zoning code, they could still request it under the special permit, and City Council could allow that additional signage. So that's pretty typical with our special permit sections. So we're requesting both an amendment to Bryan's special permit, which is 1219, and then also planning asked us to submit an accompanying amendment to the text. So we also have that in front of you today. So I'm going to start with just going over briefly some of the provisions that we're requesting for amendment in the text. One of the main things is really just a clarification, and that is to make sure that the language included that marquee and directional signs are permitted for internal wayfinding on the campus. I think what we found is we already have some of those types of signs that were shown on the sign plan, and they've been permitted, so this is really just a cleanup to make it the same as other sign provisions to allow those type of directional signages. And then the other two components are really to maybe expand the ability to do some signage out here. The first one is that it's increasing the ability to do signage on freestanding or monument-type signs from 50 to 100 square feet. The current zoning ordinance also has a distinguishment between signs that might be located on a major street versus those on a minor street, and we're requesting that that distinction be removed. And really the rationale for removing the distinction is that there's really other things that are more impactful than just the size of the sign on sides of these types of facilities that are facing residential districts. So the sign is really just one component of that. And then the second one, which is most applicable to what we're here asking for today on behalf of Bryan, is that with respect to wall signage, the current zoning code allows multiple but only 50 square feet wall signs on buildings. And so the zoning text would change it to allow up to 200 square feet of wall signage, or 30% of the wall signage, whichever is less. So instead of having, multiple 50 square feet signs, we're going to look at it more from a overall compilation of square footage, and 200 square feet seem to be a reasonable amount of signage that could be allowed on these types of buildings. I think there's a couple reasons why we feel the change in the size of the signage is appropriate. Number one, they only apply to a campus setting, so it already has to include more than one building over 2 acres. So more than likely you have multiple buildings, larger scale buildings that are coming in under this sign provision. And then secondly, all the signs required under or requested under 2769-260 are still required to be shown on a sign plan. And there's specific language in the signed ordinance that says the sign plan has to be designed to minimize adverse impacts on surrounding property. So even though the text amendment may allow larger signage, it's still subject to the review and adjustments at the time you're coming forward with your sign plan as part of your special permit. So I think there will be ample opportunities to continue to address impacts if we have those. We took the text amendment to the neighborhood roundtable, Mayor's Neighborhood Roundtable, before Planning Commission, had some nice discussion about it, and then that moved into Planning Commission. We also had a lot of discussion and addressed questions that were asked with respect to the zoning text amendments. Planning staff report did recommend approval, and we did receive unanimous approval at the Planning Commission to move forward with those text amendments. So that sort of sets us up here now for the specific then amendment to the Bryan special permit related to signing. I'm going to go ahead and maybe show you the signs that we're talking about that Bryan is asking to have added to their campus. The first one is the Faulkner Building. This is a building that is already referred to by many on the campus as the Faulkner Building. So when somebody makes an appointment and they're telling them, which office they're going to, they'll reference the Faulkner Building, but there is nothing on it currently today that would identify it as such. And so the request to add the signage on there would be for building identification. This is one building that, if the text amendment is approved, we would still be asking for your approval, because there's already the existing Brian Hart sign, which is a 100-square-foot sign. Doesn't look that big on that big building, but it's already 100 square feet. So if we added this sign, we would be over that 200-foot minimum. The next building then would be the ability to do an identification on Jones Tower is really a placeholder for now, but also be able to do identification on the top of the tower. And that one would just be allowed by right. It wouldn't necessarily take an amendment to the special permit if the zoning text were allowed. And the same thing with these two. Again, the Edwards Building, again, like the Faulkner, is already a building that's referred to by people utilizing the campus. And the Smith Tower is just a placeholder name at this point. And then the final signage would be on the new building that faces A Street. On this one, they'd be allowed by right to put the 5055 on the building because it's basically an address. We're asking that they be able to identify it as building, similar to the identification on the others. And then they'd also like on this one to be able to put the Bryan logo on there. So this is one, again, that would be over the 200 square feet if you took the entire 5055 building and the logo that we would need city council approval for.
Ms. Kakowski, on that particular one, so instead of the 5055, you would put the Smith building?
They want the flexibility to be able to identify it as the 5055 building. As soon as we
it'd be one or the other, it wouldn't be both. So
right, right, it'd be one or the other.
And then the other one for the Bryan logo, is that a relief or is that a square sign? I see it's a little bit whiter in the background. Is that just to put it on the drawing?
I think that's just to put it on the drawing, because it'll be the shape of the logo, is my understanding.
Okay.
I have a question about that.
Miriam, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
What street does that facade face?
This facade faces A Street.
Okay.
And so you have the A Street, the entire parking lot, and then the building set back toward, the interior part of the campus.
And so the distance to the nearest residential from this building is roughly?
Almost nothing. The fire station's across the
Fire
street.
station's across the
There
street.
is a backyard of one.
Maybe,
Half a ball.
I think it's over 3.
Question first is that illuminated, the logo?
You're gonna have the back on the logo illumination. Okay.
I'm Don Sheets. I'm Director of Facilities at Bryan Medical Center. And it's over 200 feet from that side of the building to the houses on A Street.
Okay.
And it is not an illuminated logo.
It's not
It
illuminated?
is not. The
Okay.
5055 would be.
Is it, but it's backlit or something? Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to address the concern of
Yeah.
light into homes, windows.
So the main purpose really for the signs is to assist with wayfinding for patients, their families, and the publics. The wall signs on the buildings or building identification, I think we feel will make it easier as people are entering the Bryan campus. It could be a confusing campus for people who are entering it for the first time or people who are coming there in a stressful situation. And so being able to help them determine when they come on campus where their final destination is so they can pick the most appropriate parking to relate to where they're trying to go would be very advantageous. We're asking really for the larger signs because they need to be larger in order to be keeping somewhat in scale with the size of these buildings. If you look at a 50 square foot sign on these multi-story buildings, it doesn't look right. Efforts have been made with the placement of the signs in order to minimize their impact. You'll see on the Faulkner building, also on the Edwards building, we were able to pull those signs down, and then they'll be visible from people coming into the campus, but not visible for those, exiting. All of the signs on those 4 interior buildings are really just related to the interior campus and not to the exterior. So the only signage really that's visible to exterior neighbors is that 50-55 building. And then there we have quite a bit of separation between the building and A Street.
While you're mentioning that, do you not also plan on a monument sign on A Street, similar to what you have on 48th? Or?
The monument signs have already been approved as part of the sign package, John, so they're already in compliance with what the zoning
This is
would
additional
allow.
and larger signage.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are just the things.
Trying to
that
get a feel for
Yep.
what the whole campus is going to have as far as signage. And I mean, it's a great facility. I was born there, so. Well, one of the former buildings. Used to be the camp birthplace, but then they tore the building down, Don.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a lot of history with this place.
Did not know that.
What?
Did not know that.
I think, just sort of in conclusion, I think this signage is important for wayfinding, attempting to make it as easy as possible to locate where people are going and identify their adjacent parking as they're entering the campus, trying to make this as least stressful as for people, as they're coming onto this campus and finding them in a situation, where they need to be visiting. Planning Department recommended approval of the amendment to the special permit. Again, we received unanimous approval from the Planning Commission, and Don or Bob or I would be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Carl.
Thank you. So there are a lot of buildings, Brian, and you can walk from building to building and never see these signs outside. So how about interior signage?
We already have interior signage for the
Okay.
Edwards and the Faulkner buildings.
Okay. I must have missed it.
That's part of our problem.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on these items?
Mr. Chair, could I clarify, one of these is a resolution, one of them's an ordinance.
We're
Did
going
you
to
want
vote on the resolution today and the ordinance next week.
Okay.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah. Okay. Next item, please.
All right, next is item 19, pre-existing use permit 3, A as in Apple, H as in Henry. Application of Campbell LLC to amend the boundary of the Gateway Mall use permit by adding property and authority to construct a total of 300 dwelling units and 70,000 square feet of commercial space, or some combination of both, including waivers to increase the maximum building height from 40 feet to 55 feet, and to reduce residential parking requirements from 2 to 1.4 stalls per dwelling unit on property generally located at 6400 Q Street.
Someone here to testify on this item?
David Carey with the Planning Department. I'll provide some background information on this item so we can move it forward. This is a request for amending the boundary of the Gateway Mall use permit. This is the type of proposal that we want to see happen in different locations, but especially here at Gateway. It provides for a true mixed-use opportunity here, both through commercial as well as through proposal for some dwelling units. We do not have the actual plan to act on today. That's something that can come forward in the future. What this does is amend the pre-existing use permit so that it allows for the opportunity for that plan to come forward. With that, I think I'll answer any questions you might have, but this is something that the Planning Department is very much in support of and received 8-0 approval from the Planning Commission.
Questions? Carl and then Cindy.
David, I noticed in there that that there's a reduction in parking requirements from 2 to 1.4 stalls per dwelling unit. For the type of housing that's envisioned, is that enough?
Yes, so that's a good question. What that is doing is being consistent with a previous amendment to the use permit that expanded on the west side of the Gateway Mall use permit recently, back in 2016, for other residential. We used that same number of 1.4. What that's based on, there is some limitation on that's so long as no more than 40% of the overall units, however many units there are two-bedroom or larger. So there's a limitation on what the impact can be there because we put that limitation on that, which we did on that previous use permit amendment as well. So we feel comfortable with that because it would implicate that, first of all, consistency with another recent approval, but also limitation on the number of multi-bedrooms of units that could be there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cindy?
So I'm trying to place this in my mind. Is this where, for the lot where the dealership used to be?
Yes, it's the former McGinnis Ford site, yep.
Okay, thank you. And is the 1.4 being consistent with the mixed use and the number of units? Would that be the same if the mixed use included, for instance, business use rather than retail?
There still would be a requirement for the commercial square footage that would be part of this in some level. So there's the requirement for parking for the commercial activity, but then the 1.4 that's applicable only if there's residential and the amount of that residential.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, John?
Would you just help me with my confusion on expanding the Gateway Mall boundaries? What was the underlying purpose of that?
This might just allow for a little bit better understanding, just to have a visual. There we go. So this is the area that we're looking at. Currently, that is not part of the use permit area. So what the use permit does, it allows for that mechanism to allow for the planning and the discussion on the types of uses that go into an area. It could be standalone, but in this case, we have the Gateway Mall there already. So what that does is that it allows for a more full discussion on how all that works together, including the parking topic as well. So it's more, in this case, it's a more holistic way of looking at the area and talking about how it interplays with an existing built-out commercial area.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 20, use permit 140 F as in Frank, application of Menard Inc. to reduce the parking requirement for a home improvement store to one space per 500 square feet of floor area on property generally located at 8900 Andermatt Drive.
David Carey again with the Planning Department on behalf of the applicant, Menard Incorporated. This is the third iteration of coming forward for this site for a reduction in the required parking, and the Planning Department and the Planning Commission are in support of this, mainly because what this does, first of all, the previous reductions in parking requirements did not show any adverse impact on the area. What this is doing is providing for a reduction in the required parking so that more area within the building can be provided for a mezzanine area, so technically increasing the built-out floor area, but the type of use that's going on here is not going to generate significantly more traffic or activity. It's more in support of the existing use there. Something to note here is that if the use were to change in this site, especially if there's to be a full redevelopment of the site, that the parking requirement would revert back to the original parking requirements that we have, and then we would have another discussion at that time with that new project. So this does have some safeguards so that if there's a significant change in the use with more traffic being generated, we would be reverting back to the regular parking requirements. I can answer any questions you might have.
Kieran?
Thanks, David. The applicant provided a table of parking requirements in many different locations throughout the Midwest, and it was a way of showing how great and significant the parking requirement in Lincoln is relative to other cities. Is that something that you're aware of existing across the board? Do we have particularly stringent parking requirements in our community relative to others in the Midwest?
I think you can see kind of a range of examples across the country. I think this being the latest example, if you recall, we've had some other recent B5 district reductions in parking, almost in every B5 district. So I think it's something that we could look at to just simply change our parking requirement, but we would want to base it on a more bigger market analysis to make sure that we're not changing it to a level that we're not comfortable with. But this is just another example of the possibility of needing to look at that.
Is that more true for newer developed parts of the city as opposed to the urban core? I know you've already loosened some of the restrictions in the sort of older neighborhoods.
Yes, so we've had other recent reductions in the required parking based on certain site-specific conditions. So it could be across the board that we might want to do that more, hefty look at our parking requirements. In a general sense, we don't want to overpark because it's lost space for the ability to develop. But at the same time, we don't want to cause a nuisance on adjacent neighborhoods or just simply not allow the site to work well. So there's quite a bit of moving parts there, but you picked up on something that we picked up on a staff level, which is perhaps we should be looking at our parking requirements more.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan Benning?
Yes, Mr. Carey, you were talking about reverting back to the existing standards. What are those in a case like this? Then?
Yeah, so I'm going to have to look at the staff report more closely.
On the retail or what have you, if that's 1 to 300?
Yes, I think it's 1 to 300. I don't have that note right in front of me, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Benny?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. That's along the same lines of my question. What does reverting back look to? We reduce the amount of space and then they build on top of it? And do they revert back? Where does the new parking spots come from?
Yes, so that's a good, in this case, the thoughtful process that this has taken actually is that there's outdoor storage available at the Menards. And so that outdoor area could revert back to additional parking if it was necessary, outside of the existing building footprint.
Okay.
So that is one way that we could handle it that way.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Good afternoon, Nick Brenner, 5101 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Appreciate the introduction. He pretty much covered everything for me. Can't complain about that. I do want to clarify that we're not taking any spaces away here. Everything's inside. The added square footage is the reason why the parking reduction's on the board. And to answer your question, I actually do have a photo or a site plan for you that I'll put on here for you that kind of shows what it looks like with the additional parking stalls. Never used one of these before.
Yep, it's going.
So I don't know if you can see the lines. I can pass this around if you
No,
can.
we can see it.
But there is substantial room in the outdoor yard to fit all these parking stalls in. And actually, the overhangs are available too. We didn't even put any stalls in there, so they could actually accommodate more stalls if that ever came up. So just thought I'd show that for you. So
You wouldn't want to turn away a customer anyway, would you?
that is another great interest to Menards. We don't want a full parking lot because what does that make people do? It makes them go somewhere else. So we definitely want to make sure we have enough parking stalls. We have by far enough parking at this store. That list that I provided, those are all new stores, current prototypes that have been approved in the last 5 years. So you can see that our average parking stall is usually in the lower 400s. We got 685 here. So quite a bit extra.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else like to testify on this? Next item, please.
All right, next are our public hearing ordinances, second reading. I'll call items 22 and 23 together. Annexation 17023, amending the Lincoln corporate limits map by annexing approximately 21.16 acres of property generally located at Northwest 48th and West Holdred Streets, and the related change of zone, application of ring neck development to amend the I-80 West Lincoln Business Center planned unit development for a change from AG agricultural to R3 residential PUD and H3 highway commercial district PUD, for planned unit development designation of said property, and for a development plan which proposes modifications to the zoning ordinance and land subdivision ordinance to allow for a mix of commercial and residential uses at Northwest 48th and West Holdridge.
Not seeing the applicant, I will come back up. David Carey with the Planning Department. This is the two related items, so we have a annexation as well as, get my information here straight, change of zone, as is read into the record. What we have here is basically the next phase of the ring neck development that is in accordance with what's in the comprehensive plan, as well as generally in conformance with the existing approved PUD. This really is fairly straightforward. What we're doing is we're annexing the next area, as well as there was one piece of property that was a standalone residence that was coordinated on this item to make sure that they were aware of the annexation. They are aware of it. They're in support of it, so we do not have an issue with that. So now what we have is just putting in place the bringing into the city as well as a change of zone for this development to take place and move forward. I can answer any questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
Carl.
Yeah, thank you. So that residence will be annexed in as well as the other property?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Benny?
Follow up on the question. The graphics that were provided appears though it's left out. Is it same the corner there that we're talking about?
Yeah, let me, I got another image here that might be of help just to clarify. It's this corner piece right here that we're looking at. So the coordination was with that property owner to make sure that was understood about the annexation.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item, these items? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 24, change of zone 17033, application of MWH Leasing LLC for a change from AG Agricultural to I-1 Industrial on property generally located at South 21st and Saltillo Road.
Good afternoon. My name is Tim Gergen, representing the owner of the Saltillo Industrial Park located at approximately 25th and Saltillo Road. What we have before you is an amendment to the preliminary plat and a change of zone, and the change of zone is for this highlighted sliver piece of property, and then the new preliminary plat boundary kind of goes out in here and follows a drainage channel. What we did earlier this year, about a year ago, is we had a preliminary plat that had this entire section preliminary platted. The owners have since purchased additional property, this leftover piece here, of in between their preliminary plat and a drainage channel, to capture this little sliver piece of property to add on to this industrial ground. Their industrial sales have been real positive in this part of town, and they wanted to capture a little bit more of the land as much as possible before we started moving forward with any more infrastructure. And I can happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Questions? Very good.
Thank you.
Very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 25, text amendment 17019, amending Title 27 of the Lincoln Municipal Code by amending Section 27.02.240 to revise the definition for warehouse by including wholesale and distribution centers in the definition, by amending the manufacturing, processing, storage, and distribution use group described in Section 27.06.180 to allow warehouses as a conditional use in the H3 and H4 zoning districts, and to strike the wholesale and distribution centers as a use, by amending Section 27.62.150 relating to manufacturing, processing, storage, and distribution use group to describe the conditions required for warehouses located in the H3 and H4 zoning districts.
David Carey with Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department, coming before you as the actual applicant on this one. This is an item that we uncovered as a needed mostly cleanup item that came forward and became aware to us as we're doing some work on a change of zone package along the Mopac Trail area. A lot of I-1 zoning there that no longer needs to be I-1, going more to an H3 zoning and some other different zoning locations throughout that to make more sense of it, as well as to have a better neighbor along side of an adjacent to residential area. What came about as part of that work, and then there are some change of zones that are coming forward to you, have gone to Planning Commission, haven't come to you yet, but a standalone and independent change to the text amendment here that you have before you to the zoning code became apparent and needed because of some ambiguity for wholesale and distribution without a definition in the zoning code, but needing to bring those types of uses into the existing definition for warehouses. So that's really what this is doing, and it's also cleaning up the use group table so that it's clear where things are allowed uses for special permit or conditional use are permitted. So that's really what this cleanup is about. What this does is it provides for more clarity on what is actually an allowed use in what areas and what zoning districts. This does not preclude the uses that are, in this case, along the Mopac Trail that will be coming forward to you for a change of zone. It does not preclude those existing uses. It does allow for them to still continue under different zoning districts. So that is the proposal that's before you today, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Questions, Lyrian?
Thanks, David. Could you help us understand the practical implications of the relocation or movement of this definition within the zoning code? Does it change how easy or difficult it is to set up a manufacturing, processing, storage, and distribution use or a warehouse? Can you help us understand who's affected by this?
Sure, I'll give a go at that. I think it might be helpful to put the use group table up here just to kind of identify what we're talking about here. What we have is, currently we have wholesale and distribution centers as an undefined use, which is part of the problem here. But and right above that is warehouses, and that is a defined use. What we're basically doing is bringing the definition and the use itself for wholesale and distribution centers into the warehouses definition so that it's more clear about what we're covering here. And then what we have is, well, as we strike this line for this purpose, we are providing for the warehouse activity to still allow for those uses to occur in the various zoning districts that go into the use group table. So the practical impact is that we're not really limiting the activities that are out there in some of these zoning districts. What we're doing is we're making sure that it's clear about what we're talking about and providing a definition to some of those activities instead of it kind of hanging out there with some ambiguity. So that's really all this is about. There's really no practical impact. We're not saying that you can't do these uses. We're saying we're being clear about where you can do them.
Is that changing, though? I mean, the table gives direction on where things are allowed. So is there any, right now, if it's not defined and it's separate, are its allowable placements changing by redefining it?
What we're saying here is that we're actually opening up one district, which is the H3 district, to allow some of those uses that currently would not be allowed. What's also being changed is that we're going from some special permit approvals to conditional, as well as some from permitted to conditional. So the process of getting some of the approvals for these changes slightly. But the idea behind that is to make sure that the level of review is appropriate for the type of use that's being proposed in a certain district. So it's not, within that is really the change. It's kind of the combining of the uses and having it defined so it's clear, but then also identifying what is a permitted versus conditional versus special permit within the different districts.
Could you review those for us so we understand what's getting easier and what's getting harder?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
For wholesale and distribution, those uses going into the B4 district, it goes from a permitted use to a conditional use, so that does have an additional level of review. Making sure, and again, this is opening up more uses that are available, but adding an additional level of review for a conditional approval. Under, as I said previously, we actually would be opening up the H3 area for some of these uses now, but going from permitted use to conditional, again, at a slightly higher level of review before approval is given. Under the H4 district, these uses would go from special permitted use up to conditional, so slightly lower review process for that.
Which ones, though? I mean, what uses?
That would be under the wholesale and distribution centers, going into the warehouses, more umbrella for all the uses. For I-1, it would remain the same, it'd be permitted to permitted. Under the I-2, same thing, permitted to permitted, and the same thing for I-3, permitted to permitted.
Can you give us some examples of the uses that would come under wholesale and distribution?
What we get into is the amount of activity, the type of activity as well as the amount of it, instead of just warehousing, which is more large space, holding materials and then sending them out, or bringing them in and sending them out. Wholesale and distribution centers, within that provide some activity of assembly as well as some sale of some of the items on site. So that was again, some of the not really miscommunication, ambiguity on what you can do and can't do under warehouses. And so some of those changes allow for explanation of those additional uses within the warehousing definition. So that's really kind of what we're talking about. And that, again, is a lot to do with seeing on the ground activities out along that Missouri Pacific Old Railroad corridor, what's actually out there today, and making sure that we're not precluding those existing activities from continuing. And we didn't have any of the heavier industrial activities out there today, so that this doesn't really impact that. It is much more on the warehousing activity side of things instead of the heavier industrial, as the real life example of how we got to talking about this.
Okay. Well, without getting into the details of the Mopac Trail situation, you mentioned that you're opening up the H3 zoning district for some of these uses that previously were not allowed, and you are making them conditional, so there's a review. But can you explain briefly what kept these uses out of the H3 in the past, or was it just an oversight?
I would actually put it under more of the oversight side of things, which is kind of indicative of the fact that there wasn't a definition for them.
Okay.
So that's partly what's going on
Wasn't
here.
that there was some rationale for not having them in
No,
H3?
I think that it was more, it didn't have a place to live, and I think that it was listed there without a lot of backing information to say this is exactly what we're talking about. Now we're trying to provide that with this change.
And you said it would have a lower standard of approval in a particular district. Which one was that again?
You say lower standard?
Yeah, well, if it's a higher standard with conditional.
Right, so that would be in the B4 district.
In the B4?
Right now, the wholesale and distribution centers would be a permitted. Under this change, it would go to a conditional approval. So instead of just being a by right, it would have to go through planning commission review.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here. So I'm trying to figure out, like, if you had a call center that also had a distribution at this point, or distribution point from that call center, at this point, are they limited in being able to operate under the current structure? Does this expand areas where you can combine the two?
I think it would depend on exactly where it's located and what the zoning is. What I'm looking for now is that there's a current limitation on the amount of certain different types of activities, that we are carrying that forward so that we're being consistent with how it's currently written. We just need to find that. There it is. Actually, let me go back. Okay, so within the definition, what we're saying is we're pulling into the definition the limitation on that the buildings, portion of buildings, or accessory uses to such buildings shall not be deemed a warehouse when direct retail sales to the public is the primary use, or where less than 50% of the floor area is for storing tangible products for distribution to retailers, industrial, commercial, institutional, or other businesses, or to other wholesalers. So that is a piece that's actually currently in the highway commercial use permit that we're striking there and bringing into this. So basically what I'm saying and trying to answer your question is that we're being consistent with how we already are dealing with these situations, but we're trying to bring clarity to the zoning code so that it's not in different locations or there's a lack of information on what we mean by some of these uses. So there's really not much of a change. On a case-by-case basis, I think we need to know where it's located, what the zoning is, and what the actual activity is in order to really answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dave, thanks. A couple months ago, I was at a neighborhood community meeting, and this topic came up for discussion. And the residents there led me to believe that there was a public meeting or a hearing. I see from the notes that no one came to Planning Commission. Was there another effort to reach the neighborhoods and talk with?
I think you might be referring to the effort that we have still ongoing with the change of zone proposal that is along the Mopac Trail area. So there were numerous meetings, and there's still ongoing discussions with some of the property owners. So that this being a standalone text amendment is not the change of zone that has a lot of interest in it. So this is.
I think I am confusing the two
It
issues.
doesn't surprise me that nobody showed up for this, to be honest with you. But I think there will be others that will show up for the future.
I think I've confused my issues.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
But I guess while Benny's raised the issue, what is the relationship, again, can you be more specific about the relationship between this text amendment and that change of zone, since they're clearly connected somehow?
It is about the actual uses that are out there today on some of those lots and some of those properties. And it became apparent that the way that was set up currently is not clear, and we needed to clean it up. Really what's happening with the change of zone is the proposal to go from I industrial zoning to a lower zoning, but still the uses are still allowed within the lower zoning. So there's not really an issue there for the change. So that's the relationship. So we're cleaning this up ahead of time. This should happen regardless of that other change of zone. That's really what we're saying today.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, I'll call items 26 and 27 together. They're annexation 17022, annexing approximately 11 acres of property generally located at South 84th and Augusta Drive, and the related change of zone, application of Newmark Golf for a change from AG agricultural to R3 residential at South 84th and Augusta Drive.
Good day, my name's Tim Gergen, representing the owners of Highmark Golf Course. This is an application to add some single-family residential homes to the Highmark Golf Course. The plan is a culmination of about 9 months of efforts working through the neighborhood with their concerns and our concerns and working together, and we do have a plan that both the neighborhood and the owners of Highmark have both like. What you see in front of you is the Highmark property that's in the dark color, and that's all part of the CUP. And this lighter shade is what is actually annexed into the city of Lincoln, and that is basically reflective of the Beal Slough sewer basin. Everything outside that is in the Stevens Creek sewer basin, which is not sewerable today. What we are asking for is an annexation for this little portion here. That is about the last piece of property we can get sewer back into the Beal Slough of Highmark Golf Course. We're going through and rearranging the golf holes right now in this area to accommodate this new home right through here. And this is that sliver area right here. This does anticipate removing the existing bunkers, reception hall and restaurant, and relocating the existing clubhouse further out into the golf course. A little bit easier to operate the 3 9-holes where you have golf holes on all sides. Here where you can only visibly see two of the starting holes. And so this is better operations for the golf course, better operations for the sewer ability to just achieve and get more homes within the Beal Slough sewer. And like I said, we've worked with the neighbors for about 9 months, most of 2017, to culminate this plan. And we've had no objections to this point through the city or through the neighborhood. I'm happy to take any questions you may have. That's Carl.
Carl.
Yeah, where's the access to the new clubhouse?
So the access will be coming in, so this is the roundabout of Augusta Drive here, and this is a new road that will be built out, and then the driveway would be built out through here, and then this is the parking lot and the clubhouse right here. And let me get you. And so this is the existing bunkers in the clubhouse here. This is the roundabout, and this is the parking lot. So there will be a new road that's built here that connects. There's already kind of a connection road here into the existing, and then this is a new road, and then that driveway would be following underneath the overhead power lines and then right into that.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on these items? Next item, please.
All right, that concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session. We'll start with item 17, approving a contract with Continuum, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 18 is special permit 1219N for Bryan Medical Center, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 19 is pre-existing use permit 3AH for Campbell LLC, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Leary and seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 20 is use permit 140F, application of Menards, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Leary and seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Public hearing ordinances second reading are items 21 through 27. Ordinances on third reading, item 28, accepting and approving an amendment of lease agreement between Lincoln Parks and Rec Department and Lincoln Parks and Rec Foundation to lease approximately 272.25 square feet of space at 3140 N Street, Suite 301 for the Foundation's office, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by Benny. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 29, text amendment 17017, amending chapters 27.59 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to airport zoning, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Our resolutions on first reading are items 30 through 36. Ordinances on first reading are items 37 through 46. Our pending list are items 47 through 52. Anyone wishing to address the council on a matter not on this agenda and not planned to appear on a future agenda may do so at this time, since it is an open microphone session.
Anyone like to speak to the council?
Mr. Chair, seeing no one coming forward, I'd move for adjournment and also reminding our viewers and citizens that we will not meet next Monday in honor of Martin Luther King Day.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Cindy. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.